They locked me outside in the rain until my billionaire sister stepped out of the jet. They didn't throw me into the storm, they staged it. The butler timed the swing of the oak door with my breath, nudged, the lock slid home like a verdict. Music from the ballroom swelled brighter, as if my absence polished the chandeliers. Satin bit my skin, water raced down the steps, perfume turned metallic on my tongue. Evelyn Grant stood in the glow, umbrella closed, smile thin. "Seattle welcomes strays," she said, "but not through this door." David hovered behind her, cufflink perfect, courage missing. He didn't speak, he watched. I steadied, heel slipping on marble, and lifted the envelope I carried all evening. Gold letters, Carter, sealed 2005. "This is for him," I said. Evelyn's hand moved faster than mine. Paper vanished into a crystal bowl like a coin tossed into a fountain no one believes in. "Gala only," she murmured, shutting both. Rain hammered the ivy, headlights looped the drive, faces pivoted toward gossip. A violin climbed, thunder answered, gulls reeled offshore. I tasted copper. Foster homes teach 3 rules: stand straight, don't beg, and memorize exits. I counted gates, cameras and guards. None were mine. A guard cracked the door to remind me I was trespassing on a life I'd almost rented. It clicked shut, neat as a scalpel. Then a new sound braided through the night. Low, patient, expensive. Not a limo. Not a helicopter. Every chin turned the same way. The iron gates trembled. Cones of white carved the cloud toward the private strip above the bluff. Radios hissed. The band missed a beat. Evelyn's knuckles whitened on the closed umbrella. David finally met my eyes. Fear? Recognition? Both. "Ma'am, you should move," the guard whispered. I didn't. I stayed in the rain, unblinking, waiting. You won't believe what happened when they realized who my sister really was. I met David on a gray Seattle afternoon that smelled like espresso and wet cedar. The cafe sat on a corner near the market, where gulls heckled tourists while a barista drew constellations in latte foam. I was shelving donated paperbacks for the community corner, earning coffee and warmth between temp shifts. He arrived with rain on his blazer, and an easy grin that made the room feel less temporary. "Is this seat taken?" he asked, respectful, unhurried. We shared the table, then our stories. He worked in finance and liked ferry decks at dusk. I was collecting hours and community college credits, choosing practical classes that would stack into something stable. We laughed about Seattle weather and compared shelter strategies. He liked wool and optimism. I liked layers and plans. When he asked for my number, I gave it without bargaining with myself first. Foster care taught me to carry small luggage and smaller expectations. Caseworkers kept calendars full of court dates and medical forms. I learned the cadence of houses by their smells: bleach, curry, cigarette smoke, lavender, rain. In one placement, I hid cash inside a shampoo bottle. In another, I slept with shoes near the door. Birthdays were popsicles if the freezer worked, a paper crown if someone remembered. I built habits: count exits, locate locks, memorize bus routes, and keep your name steady. When people said resilient, they meant quiet about pain. I saved pay stubs in a labeled folder and taped goals inside a cabinet. Finish prerequisites, apply for something with benefits, never move because rent rose overnight. By the time David called, I had a budget that bent only for emergencies and a wish I barely admitted: belonging without audition. With David, ordinary days brightened. We shared thrift store hunts and ferry rides where the skyline looked like circuitry soldered to water. He found a salsa night above a hardware store and danced badly on purpose to make me laugh. On Sundays, he learned my recipes, turned grocery lists into treasure maps, and celebrated small wins like they were promotions. He asked about classes and read my essays, returning them with sticky notes that said, "Say this louder." I told him about the job that evaporated when a contract ended, the manager who kept calling me kid, the apartment where the ceiling dripped tea-colored water on rainy Thursdays. He told me his family loved traditions and that they were opinionated but fair. He said I carried steadiness like a lantern. I wanted to believe that was enough. The Grants lived in a waterfront mansion that pretended humility with cedar shingles and long windows. The gravel drive curved past maples to glass that mirrored the sky like a possession. Inside, money whispered. Rugs softened every step. Art basked in museum lighting. A grand piano waited the way cats wait. Evelyn Grant opened the door with a cool smile, looked me over once and called for tea that tasted faintly of lemon and judgment. 2 friends arrived with peonies and seasonal charity, voices tuned for drifting compliments. They asked where I studied, what my parents did, and which clubs I liked. I answered directly, then watched their eyes organize me like a spreadsheet: columns for promise, constraint, risk. David squeezed my hand under the table. His thumb traced reassurance while his gaze flicked toward his mother. Dinner was performed elegantly. Crystal chimed, silverware gleamed, conversation floated on names that opened doors. When I thanked the housekeeper, one friend said it was sweet to notice the service, another admired my coat and asked whether I loved vintage because sustainability was fashionable. Evelyn asked how David and I met. I told the cafe story. She blinked at the punchline as if it had missed. After dessert, she showed me framed programs from charities she chaired. Photographs showed vacations where horizons looked curated. On the patio, the bay moved with practiced rhythm, a sound like certainty. I stood there long enough to steady my breath. From inside I heard laughter pulsing, and felt the invisible gate that separates the invited from the accepted. Months taught me choreography. I read articles about wine to decode dinner talk. I practiced answering questions that sorted people without granting the sorter power. I replaced apologies with steadiness, and carried humor like an umbrella. When conversations drifted toward ancestry, I pivoted to neighborhoods, ferry routes, and bakeries that sold morning buns still warm. Staff knew my name, some guests used it like a novelty. David tried to buffer sharp edges, but he often deferred to the first frown from a donor. He'd promise, "I'm with you," then adjust a cufflink while meeting someone else's eyes. I told myself that compromise looked like patience. I told myself grace could be a strategy. I told myself love would bridge any gap. The invitation to Evelyn's 60th birthday arrived on heavy paper engraved in navy. Black tie, waterfront residence, proceeds to an arts program that placed instruments in public schools. The cause made my chest glow. The guest list printed in a lifestyle magazine made my stomach twist. I saved 2 paychecks, booked a salon, and chose a dress after 3 fittings and a long talk with a clerk, who treated me like I belonged in mirrors. I downloaded a tutorial on updos, and then let the stylist take over when my hands began to shake. The color was midnight, the hem clean, the fit exact. The stylist said, "Walk like the room is yours." I practiced in the narrow apartment, shoes tapping out a quiet claim on rented linoleum. On the afternoon of the gala, clouds stacked over Elliott Bay. I painted my nails with the steady concentration I used to fill out forms. I pinned small silver hoops from my foster aunt, the woman who taught me to hem jeans and speak kindly to tense people. In the mirror, a version of me I'd been building appeared, shoulders back, gaze clear, edges softened but not erased. David arrived with a corsage wrapped in tissue, told me I looked beautiful, and promised we'd have fun. He slid into reassurance like it was a warm coat. I believed him because hope has muscle memory. Rain began as a mist that evening, the kind that slicks leaves and hides intentions. Valets jogged with umbrellas, headlights curled around the drive like bracelets. The mansion's windows glowed, promising warmth on the other side of the glass. In the foyer, greetings landed softly and evaporated. "Lovely to see you. What a surprise. How elegant." They said it was elegant, the way people say interesting when they don't want to commit. Evelyn kissed David's cheek, then held me at arm's length as if inspecting a restoration project. "Polished," she said, and her friends hummed in approval that sounded almost like reluctance. A woman asked where my family would be sitting. I answered lightly that tonight, my family was the person holding my hand. The ballroom shone like a promise. Chandeliers braided light, a quartet stitched Vivaldi to the hum of conversation, lilies perfumed the air to the edge of sharp, crystal glittered on tables where place cards whispered allegiances, glances slid across my dress, posture and borrowed clutch. Someone said community college proved grit, and asked if I'd considered transferring somewhere with a name that traveled farther. A woman asked which neighborhood I called home and repeated it like a point on a map she didn't visit. A cousin suggested a charity internship that paid in access. I kept my smile even, breath measured, spine tall. David caught my eye, promised he'd stay close, then drifted toward his mother, leaving me smiling at strangers measuring worth by old CERN. Chandeliers dripped light like rain, caught and frozen mid-fall. The mansion curated perfection and pretended it was effortless. I stood inside it and measured my breath. "David's fiancé?" a woman asked, smile polite, eyes appraising. I nodded. She leaned closer. "Where did you study?" I named my college. "No Ivy League," she said, airy, surgical. "Not yet," I answered. A crease formed. "Ambition is charming," she said, already turning towards someone with a donor wall in his foyer. Another pair closed the ring. "Who brought you into this circle?" he asked. "Which mentors?" she added. I said my boss taught me to document processes and hit deadlines. They blinked. "Sponsorship matters," he said. "You'll see." A third guest arrived with a flute and a scent like winter roses. "What do your parents do?" she asked, casual as weather. "Foster care," I said. Silence paused. "Resilient," she replied. "Bootstraps," he echoed. The orchestra slid into something sprightly. David moved like a current through rocks, shaking hands. collecting compliments, laughing on cue. He glanced at me and lifted a hand, promise flashing like a lighter. Then the foundation president beckoned, and he turned. I tasted lemon in my water and counted calmly. At the silent auction table, I skimmed trips, chefs and vistas, while two women behind me whispered about blenders and budgeting. I met their eyes until their smiles thinned. Rain needled the terrace doors. The bay pulled at the pilings below like a restless animal. I smoothed my dress, fixed my breath, and stepped back into the swirl. "Which sorority?" a stranger asked, eyes bright with friendliness that bit. "None," I said. "You'll need a table," she replied. Women open doors differently. They left when a banker's wife lifted a wrist. Evelyn ruled the dais with perfect posture and a dress that drank light. Friends orbited her, caught by gravity and habit. She surveyed the room the way a captain studies weather. When her gaze crossed mine, the temperature shifted a degree colder. Smiles do that when eyes stay still. David reached me at last. "You good?" he asked, breathless. "Stay near," I said. 2 minutes, he promised, squeezing my fingers, attention already sliding toward the MC. I watched him go and told myself to last longer than a promise. A tray of red wine sailed toward us. A woman in feathers stepped back for a laugh she wanted admired. Her elbow clipped a stem by my hand. The glass tipped with cruel grace. Wine cascaded and found satin-like destiny. Cold spread, color spread. The server apologized. The woman gasped. "How clumsy of you," she said, hand to pearls, eyes clear of guilt. Her friend sighed. "Gravity favors practice." I set the empty stem on the tray and examined the bloom. My heart thudded once, hard. Napkin, blot, turn, press. Laundry room lessons from houses with taped rules and stacked quarters. The stain held like a flag. I kept dabbing. A ripple of attention formed. It wasn't silence, it was an appetite. Evelyn arrived with a smile that warmed no one. "We set simple tasks," she said, voice gentle, volume perfect. "Hold a glass, stand still, listen." Laughter prickled around us like nettles. "It was an accident," I said. She bumped the tray. Several guests grew fascinated by the ceiling. Evelyn lifted a hand, accepting responsibility for nothing. "Accidents reveal training," she replied. "Training reveals fit." She widened the audience with a tiny pivot. "My son's future demands caution. He cannot spend it tidying up after errors." She let the next word fall clean. "Mistake." Heat climbed my throat. I located David. He stood beside a trustee, posture attentive, jaw tight. He knew that tone. He knew what it did to me. He did not move. His eyes met mine for a heartbeat and slid away. More guests gathered. The MC near the stage thanked donors and spoke about art saving children. Applause swelled, faded. In our bright circle, the test continued. "Standards protect progress," Evelyn said. "Boundaries protect standards." Her friends hummed yes, like bees in a manicured hedge. My hands worked while my mind burned. Blot, breathe, square shoulders, stack facts. I came with an invitation. I came with the man she praised. I had not ruined anything except a dress I fought to afford. The napkin turned pink. The stain brightened and stayed. A man leaned close. "Don't take it personally," he murmured. "He meant, leave." A woman added, "She tests everyone." She meant, we already chose sides. I set the napkin down and faced Evelyn. The violins climbed until my bones rang. "I hear you," I said. Calm, clear. "I also hear the quartet. The rain, the valor saying each other's names. The staff fixing small disasters so the picture holds." A muscle moved in her cheek. "Projection suits performance backgrounds," she replied. "Theater is useful, not here." Someone whispered that my dress had been brave. Another wondered if I had a spare in the car. Laughter fluttered and perched. The photographer called for a group portrait on the steps. People arrayed themselves by instinct and ladder. Evelyn curled 2 fingers at David. He went. She did not beckon me. A server offered seltzer. I said yes. The fizz whispered secrets. I lifted color inward, saving an inch, then another. My breath found a steadier place. Pride rerouted tears. It promised me later. A waltz unfurled like a ribbon. Couples covered the floor with practiced grace. I stepped aside, and the margin felt like a cliff. Evelyn's smile returned, precise as needlepoint. "We'll talk later," she said. Tone maternal, edge steel. "You must learn, or accept." She left the sentence open. The room wrote the ending for her. I folded the napkin and set it on the tray like a small white flag I refused to wave. A thought rose and burned clean. Have you ever felt judged for who you are? Drop a comment about it below. I did not speak it aloud. I carried it behind my teeth, a message for anyone who had stood bright with shame and chosen not to break. David came down the steps after the portrait. He stopped 2 away. Words shaped and collapsed. His hand lifted, fell. His gaze slid toward his mother, toward donors, toward safety. "I need to handle a pledge," he said. Gone. A new number began. My dress cooled against my skin. Rain rattled the glass. Lilies thickened the air until it felt like a lid. I counted my pulse to 4 and back to 1. I set my palms against my thighs to quiet the tremor. No one saw. Outside, the storm settled in, stubborn and thorough. The terrace breathed with gusts as if the house had lungs. Above me, chandeliers held 100 small fires hostage. I imagined matching them, quiet, bright, contained. For now, Evelyn lifted a glass for her toast. To family, she said. To legacy. The room sang the line back to her. I lifted nothing. Wine dried into a map across my dress. The map pointed toward a door I could feel but could not yet see. Dread edged closer, steady as the rain, certain as the next song starting without me. Evelyn tapped her flute with a spoon, a sound that hushed the quartet. She didn't raise her voice, she never had to. Friends, she said, smiling without warmth. Tonight honors legacy. We celebrate what fits. Her gaze found me. Some arrivals feel aspirational, admirable perhaps, not compatible. The word traveled from face to face. They don't belong in our lanes, she finished. Eyes followed me like searchlights in a museum hallway. My pulse climbed into my throat. The wine stain cooled against my skin. I lifted the invitation from my clutch. I'm here with— We know, she replied, already turning toward a trustee, and we're adjusting accordingly. Her glance brushed David like a command. He smoothed a cufflink that didn't need touching. She raised her glass. For harmony's sake, our guest will step out. The guest sounded almost like a stray. Security. 2 men in black separated from the walls. The room relaxed at the promise of order restored. This way, miss. Miss, not Maya. Names evaporate when power reclassifies you as noise. I nodded because sometimes dignity looks like compliance. I have an invitation. I tried again. Evelyn didn't blink. So do hundreds, she said. This is my home. I searched for David. He stood 3 steps away, frozen among donors. Our eyes met for one beat. Move, I thought. Choose me. His mouth formed half a sentence, then died on it. Silence masqueraded as respect. We began the walk. Heels found marble, then lost it. I corrected, palm grazing a column to save balance. Conversation brightened behind us, calibrated to pretend nothing happened. A woman I'd told about ferry routes watched me as if I were a clip on her phone. We passed portraits of judges looking past mortals. My dress clung, fabric cold against skin. On the second step, my heels slid. A soft sound escaped before I caught it. The nearer guard slowed. Careful, he murmured. By the doors, chatter thickened. Background matters. She seems sweet. Sweet doesn't scale. Words gathered like nuts. I kept my eyes on the brass handles opening to the weather. Thunder rolled over the sound, patient as an animal that knows it will win. Evelyn's voice carried once more, almost musical. We safeguard serenity here. I'm sure she understands. Laughter chimed around us. I turned to David. Last try, last tiny bridge. Please, I said. He watched like someone timing a departure. Then donors reclaimed him. The foyer floor mirrored light until the world doubled. 2 guards, 2 doors, 2 of me. One walked, one burned down to ash, invisible in all this polish. I straightened the version I could carry and kept moving. Glass admitted the storm. Wind pushed ivy in waves. The doors swung, and cold struck like a verdict. Thunder roared like judgment. The men guided me over the threshold. Mind the step. I took it and stood alone on stone slick as ice. Rain stitched hair to neck. Mascara tasted bitter. Breath smoked white and vanished. No car waited. No taxi would reach a gated lane without a code. My phone glowed at 14%, then 13. I ordered a ride. The map spun. A driver accepted, cancelled, accepted again, then vanished. Water pooled in shoes. The dress glued itself to my legs. The stain surrendered its borders and joined a wider ruin. Lightning bleached hedges to bone. Somewhere a dog barked, then remembered how this house works. I stepped beneath a stone arch that offered the idea of shelter while wind threaded through. I called my foster aunt. Voicemail. I tried a co-worker, message left. I considered knocking for a towel and tasted humiliation. I turned away. Through the glass, people reclaimed the spot where I'd stood. Evelyn lifted her chin, then her flute. The crowd returned to celebration with the relief of a ship correcting course. David raised a glass and didn't drink. A donor touched his sleeve and he rotated back into place. The storm took the property as if earning it. Water sluiced off the portico in ropes. The bay gnawed at the pilings below. I thought about case notes that skip the weather around a wound. I thought about kids who leave before leaving chooses them. A valet approached, young, apology on his face. There's a heater by the stand, he said, gesturing toward a small shelter near the drive. Before I answered, a woman called his name from the portico. He flinched. I'm okay, I said. He slipped me a folded towel and vanished. It smelled like detergent and garages. I draped it over the shoulders already soaked. My phone reached 8%. I dimmed the screen and tried again. Another driver accepted and stayed accepted, then wrote about the gate. I said I would walk to the lane. The map recalculated and sulked. I told my feet to move. Heels on wet stone felt like a dare. I slid them off, held them by the straps, and let my toes find the cold texture. Gravel bit. Information more than pain. The towel gained weight until it dragged like regret. Wind slapped hard enough to feel like an insult. I laughed once, short and cracked, at the absurdity of music swelling inside, while outside I practiced survival. Ever been betrayed by someone you loved? Tell me how you got through it. The sentence sat inside my chest like a coal I refused to drop. Behind me, the mansion shrank into a glowing rectangle. Ahead, iron gates hunched, teeth dulled by mist. Headlights crested the hill, then banked toward the private strip above the trees, too smooth to be a cab. Engines hummed on a frequency that sounded expensive. I reached the mouth of the lane and paused under pines that hurled water like handfuls of nails. The screen showed 6%. My ride crawled across the map like a beetle. I felt small and distilled, boiled down to a will and a pulse. Thunder rolled again. Closer. I looked back once more. Not for them but for me, to etch the picture. Marble steps shining like ice. Umbrellas blooming for the valuable. A woman confusing hierarchy with holiness. A man is still learning that love requires courage at inconvenient times. Hair stuck to cheekbones. Teeth tapped like keys finishing a sentence no one wanted typed. I tucked the shoes under one arm, lifted my chin, and started toward the road lit by distant cones of white. Wind shoved at my back. I fixed my eyes on the end of the lane, and counted steps in fours learned during long foster nights. 4 breaths, 4 beats, repeat until morning. I told myself this was only weather. I told myself I had been colder. I told myself my heart would remember how to warm me without permission. Something shifted. Pressure, pitch, attention, sound braided through the storm. Low, patient, wrong for taxis, wrong for private cars. I paused, shoes against ribs, towel clinging, dress heavy as a reprimand. The gates trembled. Cones of light carved cloud from above, angling toward the strip beyond the trees. Party music inside faltered by half a beat. Guards at the door touched their earpieces. Even the bay seemed to hold its breath. I stood in the rain and did not look away. Rain needles my skin as I walk the long curve of the driveway. Shoes hooked over 2 fingers. Towel sliding from one shoulder like a surrendered flag. The house burns behind me. A museum pretending to be mercy. Its chandeliers cheerful about exile. Mascara tastes like metal and salt. I keep moving because stillness invites collapse. Gravel taps my feet, a metronome counting the distance between the door that shut and a gate that might never open. Thunder prowls the bay with patient authority while wind searches the hedges for loose people. I am loose people. The stain on my dress has bloomed into a flag I didn't choose. My phone blinks at 5%. I try a rideshare and watch the icon appear, hesitate and vanish. I laugh once, brittle, then steady my breath and lift my chin because pride can warm what the rain tries to freeze. Headlights skim the firs and dissolve, but a different sound rises through the weather, low and civilized, too smooth to be a car and too grounded to be a helicopter. Cones of light open in the clouds like doors, cutting through rain that had ignored me for hours. A sleek jet shudders down toward the private strip above the bluff and turns the storm into scenery. Its descent is unhurried, precise, inevitable. The runway glows in obedient beads. The engines hush into a purr that has never begged permission. Water runs off the portico. Valets freeze, then remember choreography. Guards touch earpieces, receiving instructions that change nothing. A black sedan separates from the service road and glides along the circular drive with the calm of an answered question. It stops without drama. Confidence has its own weather, and tonight it finally chooses my lane, even if I don't yet believe it. The rear door opens like a line entering on cue. A woman steps out, and the night edits itself to accommodate her. Long wool coat, tailored trousers, dark hair in a low knot that says time belongs to her. No umbrella. She chooses the rain, and the rain agrees. She reads the portico, the guards, the chandelier glare, then finds me under the cedar. Something tips in my chest. Recognition arrives before reason and jolts my wrists. She walks with measured urgency. I move toward her barefoot, each stone an argument and a promise. We stop an arm's length apart. She smiles, small and devastating, a smile that solves puzzles. Carter, she says, voice clear enough to cut the wind. The name lands like a key. Reflex makes me search for another claimant. There is only me. Her eyes soften. Maya, she repeats, testing a memory we never kept. Safe. She lifts the towel from my shoulder, shrugs out of her coat, and wraps it around me with a quick tuck that knows where warmth hides. Cedar, detergent, and a breath of jet fuel settle over ruined satin. I've been looking for you, she says, and the sentence slides into a space I kept empty for years. I'm Elena. The name flips on a light in a locked room. A memory rises. 2 girls on a county bench sharing a sandwich, one older by 8 years, promising to come back from a meeting that ran long. Placement split us, paper botched our names, birthdays were shuffled, and mail disappeared into offices that hated being wrong. Elena, I whisper, and my ribs release. She studies my face with reverence. I don't know how to receive, and laugh once. You kept our name, she says. Good. They never filed us properly. We breathe together. She gestures to the sedan. Come get warm. Her tone makes the argument feel wasteful. Inside, heat blooms like mercy. The driver meets my eyes in the mirror and decides to be a wall. A blanket appears, then a bottle of water. The leather smells new without shouting. I pull her coat tight and tuck my bare feet under the hem. Elena sits across from me, posture easy, attention ruthless. Up close, she resolves into home. Our brow, our cheekbones, our stubborn mouth, older, steadier. A thin scar arcs above her brow. What are you doing here? I ask. An invitation crossed my desk, she says. Someone texted what they did at the door. I told the pilot to divert. She opens a waterproof wallet and sets a creased photo in my hands. 2 girls on a bench, paper cups, knees touching, eyes defiant. She nods, steady as a lighthouse tonight. Your desk? I ask, still wrapped in her coat, steam rising from the towel near the vent. She tilts her head toward the runway lights. Carter Tech, she says. Security, privacy, infrastructure. I built it, I run it. Tonight I flew it here. The word billionaire echoes in my skull, not as a brag but as geography. I kept our last name on every document, she adds. It refused to be erased. It should have meant both of us. Headlines I never followed dissolve against her presence. She says, I wrote to agencies that hate being wrong. I hired investigators. I asked retired caseworkers to trust memory over screens. One office miskeyed your birth date, another inverted your middle name, a third stored you under a street you never lived on. I funded the search yearly. A donor texted, a girl with Carter bones stands in the rain. Here I am. Outside, the storm steps back as if giving us room. The sedan moves toward the service road. We pass the guard box, the barrier lifts because recognition outranks protocol. At the rise, the jet waits, patient and white, like an answer that took the scenic route. Stairs lower, crew brace umbrellas, the wind refuses, and laugh anyway. I step out wrapped in Elena's coat, bare feet tucked, tasting rain with kerosene and relief. Inside the cabin, summer lives, soft light, soft seats, the quiet competence of people who know what they're doing. A heater hums near my legs, wool socks appear, tea arrives steadily. Elena sits beside me. We'll start simple, she says. Warmth, food, a call to anyone you choose. Then we pull records, gather photographs, reclaim pieces scattered because agencies preferred boxes to sisters. Then we decide our next move together. At your tempo, not theirs, from now on. Hope arrives like heat spreading from the ribs, slow and certain. It moves through fingers that stop shaking, and into a spine that remembers how to stand. Through the window the mansion shrinks, the bay exhales, the storm loosens its grip. David's outline flickers, then fades. I let it go. Elena studies my face as if verifying I am not an idea. You're safe, she says, and the words anchor. I sip tea and realize belonging can start when one person refuses to misfile you. We could turn back, or not. Choice rings are richer than any jewel. I hold the photo of 2 girls and slide it into my pocket like a compass. Have you ever dreamed of a family you never knew? Share your story. The thought rises like a light. I lace my fingers with my sisters and watch runway lamps blink while the night relearns our names. Warm air held the cabin like a promise while rain braided silver lines along the oval windows. Elena set a leather folio on the table, then a small box of flash drives labeled in neat block letters. Carter home, summer fair, Mara reads. I sat wrapped in her coat, socks swallowing my ankles, dress drying under a quiet vent, trying to memorize the shape of this moment. We start with truth, she said, opening the folio. Our parents married young, college library, stubborn hearts, too many books, not enough rent. She smiled. He repaired violins in a shop that smelled like cedar and rosin. She taught literature and read aloud at bedtime even when deadlines prowled. She slid a photo toward me, a woman with bright, steady eyes holding a baby whose hair curled into defiant commas. The woman's nose matched mine. Her name was Mara, Elena said. She said names matter because stories need anchors. I touched the glossy corner. Heat climbed my throat. I could not find memories, only recognition, arguing with loss. Another photo showed 2 little girls beneath a crooked paper banner. Elena stood taller, hand clasping a toddler's fist, knees scabbed, pride unbothered. Dad drew that banner, she said. Mom declared crooked can still be beautiful. I don't remember, I whispered. You were tiny, she answered gently. Memory never learned fairness. She cast a clip to the cabin screen. The afternoon flooded a small kitchen. A laughing woman dusted flour from a black shirt. A toddler drummed a pot. An older child narrated with stage authority. July 4th, Elena said. He called shortcakes architecture. The woman leaned toward the camera, eyes shining. Maya, my moon, she whispered, and the sound struck something hidden in my ribs. The next clip wandered through a neighborhood fair. Pennants, a busking violinist, a stroller rattling over cracked pavement, sunlight through maple leaves. He tuned for bands in exchange for pie, she said, laughing softly. She forgave late returns when the reason was rain. What happened? I asked. I was 9. You were 1. First storm of winter. A truck slid on black ice and pushed their car into a guardrail that did nothing. Gone before anyone could say our last name right. She took my hand, grip sure. Neighbors tried to keep us together. Agencies followed forms. Photocopies with county stamps appeared. One clerk inverted your middle name. Another transposed a birthday. A database swallowed you and called it order. A separate sheet carried signatures from the family that adopted her. They composted, told jokes, and let me be loud. Good people. They wanted you too. How did you find me? At 16, I learned public records, she said. At 20, I interned for a privacy lawyer who believed information could heal. At 25, I started Carter-Tech to build tools that keep ordinary people from getting misfiled. At 27, I hired investigators with long memories. At 32, I paid a retired caseworker to walk me through storage rooms where paper sleeps. Last year, I cross-referenced rosters, clinic logs, shelter intakes, and 4 mismatched spellings. Tonight, a donor texted from this gala. A girl with Carter bones was left in the rain. I redirected the flight. I pictured the mansion door closing, the stain cooling like a reprimand, this woman choosing weather and refusing to look away. Tears pressed, then retreated. If the jet hadn't made it, I said, then I would have driven, she replied, or walked. Finding you was not optional. She produced a small silver locket dulled by years. The hinge stuck, then yielded. Inside, 2 tiny photos faced each other. Mara at a window with steam rising from a mug, a sleeping toddler draped over a book. She wore this at yard sales, Elena said. She said stories live wherever we let them. She set the chain in my palm. Metal warmed as if it remembered. Something inside me loosened. The attendant brought ginger tea and a plate of plain crackers. I ate because my hands needed a job besides shaking. Elena scrolled to an email thread labeled Search Index, and a map dense with pins. Years, she said, not boasting. I filed grants in your name so your trail wouldn't close. I read rules until they made sense and argued them until they bent. Another folder opened. Mara was reading a poem about crossing seas with courage and bread. Her cadence braided steadiness through the cabin, and the distance between then and now shrank by impossible inches. Belonging arrived like sunrise inside fog, modest and thorough. It slid beneath bone and warmed places I had taught to stay cold. Disbelief hovered because habit resists joy, then thinned. What happens now? Whatever we decide, she said. Sleep, shower, choose clothes that aren't apologies. Then we look at school, work and places where you already feel strong. If you want, Carter-Tech can be a bridge. If not, I'll stand behind whatever path you pick while keeping storms off your back. She studied my face. I won't steer your life. I'll guard your name. You don't have to fight my battles, I said. I'm not here to fight for you, she answered. I'm here to fight beside you. Tonight used money to dress cruelty as culture. We know better cloth. Her fingers touched the locket resting against my throat. You belong without negotiation. If anyone tries to downgrade you to a risk, they can speak to me first. The cabin dimmed a shade. Engines whispered. Rain washed the fuselage like a benediction. Heat pooled behind my ribs. You're really here, I said. And staying, she answered. Sisters are a lifetime contract. Fine print, playlists and recipes. We laughed and the sound carried relief the way wings carry lift. One final clip appeared. A park heavy with spring. Mara was reading while the toddlers chased bubbles. She looked up and said, if you forget the route home, hum. The melody remembers. The screen dimmed. Silence settled like a quilt. Eleanor reached for my hand again. I let mine stay. Tomorrow we go back, she said. Together. Not to beg, not to bargain. To correct the record. I pictured the foyer, the portraits, the piano pretending it understood grace. I pictured Evelyn learning that worth has nothing to do with marble, and David realizing love without courage is decoration. The thoughts did not burn. They clarified. We will walk through the same door, through whatever door we choose, she said. You won't stand on any step alone. I nodded, and the gesture felt like a key finally turning. The locket warmed against my skin. Small sun, steady pulse. Outside, the storm kept knocking, but inside, the strength that began long before tonight finally said its name out loud, and I recognized it as mine. Eleanor listed simple next steps. Call my foster aunt. Document everything while memories are still warm. retrieve records from the case offices, secure copies, schedule a meeting with counsel, and choose a time to rest without alarms. She suggested breakfast at a quiet diner overlooking the ferries. I pictured mugs, steam, sunlight, and us drafting new definitions for home. The vision steadied me, clear and ordinary, and therefore perfect for us both. The gala did not pause for weather or conscience. Vivaldi swelled, softly. Glass chimed. Laughter varnished the air, while valets shook rain from umbrellas and guards returned to their posts. Then 2 cars slid to the steps. Dark, absolute. Security stepped out, earpieces bright. A woman in a charcoal suit lifted a slim case. Elena exited last, composed, coat open like a banner. I followed in dry clothes, head high, the locket steady. We entered between columns as the quartet finished a flourish. Heads turned, puzzled first by the suits, then by the echo in our faces. Evelyn stood near the dais with a practiced beam. When she saw me, the beam faltered. When she saw my sister, it died. "Good evening," Elena said, voice even and carrying. "We're here for a correction." Evelyn reset her smile. "We're closed to outside guests," she replied. "Staff can direct you to the service drive." "I'm not a guest," Elena said. "I'm family. You threw Maya into a storm. Now you will listen." David appeared, perfect tie, imperfect courage. "Maybe we should speak in private," he murmured. "Mum didn't mean." "She meant every syllable," Elena answered. The woman in charcoal opened her case and set papers on a console beneath a portrait of a retired judge. "Dana Ortiz, counsel," she said. "We represent Ms. Carter. This is a contemporaneous record of tonight's removal. Witness statements welcome." Evelyn's laugh was brittle. "This is absurd." "Absurd," Elena replied, "is calling a woman a mistake and ordering her ejected from a fundraiser while thunder shakes the house." Someone whispered my name like a rumor, choosing to become fact. Another breathed, "Ortiz represents Carter Tech." Evelyn adopted the tone of a woman who has hosted 1,000 apologies without ever making one. "There was a misunderstanding," she said. "Security acted to de-escalate." "You escalated," Elena said, cool as a blade. "You announced she doesn't belong. You taught the room that your standards excuse cruelty." David tried again. "Let's not turn a small incident into a spectacle." "Small," I said quietly. Elena faced him. "You let your silence do violence and called it respect," she said. "You judged her worth by your standards, not hers." A hedge fund donor near the steps murmured, "Carter Tech?" Recognition rippled outward. A reporter from the city desk eased his phone lower. Evelyn blinked. "You're with that company?" "I built it," Elena said. "I lead it. We secure hospitals, grids, ports, courts, and the networks running your auctions. You measure legacy in invitations. I measure it in uptime and cities that do not go dark. Your wealth is generous here. Mine does not fit this room." The quartet softened to a drone. Lightning flashed beyond the glass like paparazzi outside a courthouse. Dana placed another document on the table. "Notice to preserve records," she said. "Texts, emails, internal messages, guest communications, security directives, vendor instructions, spoliation consequences are attached." A woman in cobalt raised a hand. "I saw the door close," she said. "I heard the word mistake." The staff captain stepped forward. "Security escorted Ms. Carter at Mrs. Grant's direction," he said, voice steady. Evelyn lifted her chin. "We will not be tried in our own home," she said. "We protect our son." "From whom?" Elena asked. "From a woman with a job, a transcript, and a spine. From witnesses who prefer honesty to polish. From donors who will ask why a beneficiary was expelled during a gala for children." David looked at me, guilt blooming late. "I didn't know about your family," he said, as if discovery could redeem cowardice. "You never asked," I answered. Evelyn sought the familiar ground of hierarchy. "This event funds programs across the city," she said. "We are very generous." "Generosity that requires humiliation is a purchase, not a gift," Elena replied. The MC stepped forward with a microphone lifted like a shield. "Friends, if we can return to the program, we are the program," Elena said, without heat. "Lesson 1, status without empathy is vandalism. Lesson 2, when harm is public, repair begins publicly." She turned to the crowd. "You watched a woman pushed into the weather to safeguard a fiction about belonging. Take a longer look. This is Maya Carter. She belongs because she is here." Dana's pen moved. A paralegal time-stamped witness notes with calm precision. "Our security remained still, present like infrastructure, offering shape rather than threat." A donor whispered, "Is Carter Tech the firm that stabilized the grid last winter?" A council member said yes, breath caught halfway between awe and calculation. Another guest murmured numbers that described market value. Heads tilted toward Eleanor as if gravity had changed. Evelyn tried to pivot toward courtesy. "If we offended, we regret it," she said, words polished and empty. "We'll speak tomorrow." "Tomorrow was the plan when you needed us quiet," Elena said. "Tonight is the correction." She placed a photo of our mother on the console, propped against the judge's frame. Her name was Mara, she said. She taught us that crooked can still be beautiful, and that stories belong to those who live them. Maya's story does not require your permission. The room softened. Not pity, not yet. Attention, newly honest. David reached for me, a fraction of a step. I can fix this, he said. You would have, I replied, if you had wanted to. He stopped. Evelyn worked to restore choreography. Security will show you out, she said, but the guards did not move. They looked at their captain. He lifted a shoulder by the smallest degree and stayed where he was. Dana closed the case. We'll schedule a meeting to resolve acknowledgements of wrongdoing and outline remedial commitments, she told Evelyn. Counsel present. Public record available by default. Evelyn's composure thinned. What do you want? She asked. Nothing from you, Elena said. Everything for her. She faced the room again. If you wish to continue supporting instruments for students, meet Ms. Ortiz by the side doors. Your gifts will be routed transparently, without humiliation. If you prefer the old arrangement, stay planted. A murmur rose, half shame, half relief. Several donors moved first, unwilling to miss a tide turning. The quartet stopped entirely. I spoke, voice clean. I came here hoping to belong, I said. I left believing I didn't. That belief was your failure, not mine. Elena slid her coat from her shoulders and set it over mine anyway. Ritual and right. We are leaving, she said, because we choose our doors now. We turned. Our team opened a path through a crowd, learning new reflexes. The foyer's light seemed less cold. Rain tapped the glass without anger. As we reached the steps, the staff captain appeared with towels. He offered one to me, one to Elena, and kept one for himself. Thank you, I said. Thank you, he answered, as if a weight had finally moved off his ribs. Behind us, the mansion tried to remember its script, and could not find it. Ahead, the night smelled like cedar and beginnings. Elena's hand found mine. The locket warmed. We descended together, not to flee, but to set the next scene on ground that would not shrink under our feet. We reached the bottom step as rain thinned to mist, and the house kept pretending music could mend what it refused to name. Dana closed her case and waited. I turned toward the doorway, found David's silhouette framed by crystal, and spoke so I would never rewrite it later. I wanted your love, not your money. He heard it. Evelyn heard it. The quartet resumed on instinct. We left without haste, dignity walking beside us like a person I could finally trust. Morning arrived with ferries sliding across grey water and coffee lifting calm. Alana stood barefoot in her kitchen, sleeves rolled. Dana joined us with a tablet and a plan already in motion. A preservation notice went out to the grants and their vendors before apologies could be offered. The statement listed the essentials: public removal, false remarks, foreseeable harm. Dana's voice never rose. It arranged consequences into neat columns. News moved fast. A columnist described a party that chose polish over decency. An anchor asked why philanthropy needs humiliation to shine. Messages reached Dana from staff who had swallowed discomfort for years. Witnesses offered timestamps, angles and names whispered in kitchens where truth rests after service. David called at noon. I watched the screen ring, then fade. He texted paragraphs about context, intention, stress, legacy, and pressure. I read once and put the phone face down. Elena slid a bowl toward me and said nothing until silence became safety. We walked the waterfront, gulls heckling tourists, wind tugging hair, clouds beginning to break. I breathed like a person learning a new instrument, slow, deliberate, steady enough to make music later. Carter Tech did not perform opulence, it performed function. Glass let in honest light. Conference rooms held whiteboards tattooed with diagrams and small jokes. Teams argued like friends. Elena brought me through the lobby and introduced me without fanfare. This is my sister, Maya. She belongs. HR moved with precision that felt like grace. A badge, a laptop, a chair that did not wobble, a mentor who listened more than spoke. I joined a civic resilience group, mapping vulnerabilities for institutions that cannot afford mistakes. My first assignment asked me to translate chaos into checklists for a hospital network. Work gathered my scattered attention and gave it a home. Dana ran the legal track with an athlete's stride. Witness interviews, vendor contracts, security directives, event memos, a demand to preserve digital and physical records. She referenced defamation with cool precision. She requested a public apology that named the act and recognized the harm, plus reforms, training and oversight tied to donations. The family's counsel suggested privacy. Dana declined. Repair requires daylight. Days stacked into weeks. I learned names, systems, and the cafeteria's soups. Elena insisted we schedule pockets of ease, movie nights, trail walks, weekends with phones parked in a drawer. Some evenings, we set our mother's locket on the table and filled history with guesses that made us laugh. I taught Elena a sauce my foster aunt invented. She taught me how to read a quarterly without flinching. We took pictures of ordinary victories, a fixed drawer, a plant reviving, a bowl of cherries at their peak. Apologies from David kept arriving like weather alerts, frequent and late. Some were long, some brief. I answered none. Silence was not cruelty, it was clarity. I mailed the ring back with tracking, no note enclosed, only a receipt filed under a folder named closures. One afternoon, he waited outside the building. Security asked whether I wanted to meet. I declined and went to a product review where someone tore apart a diagram I had drawn and ended by saying, "Good, now it is strong." I carried that sentence longer than any apology ever sent me. Evelyn issued a statement that sounded wrung through committees: regret for distress, commitment to values and gratitude to supporters. It did not say what she did. Sponsors recognized polish without accountability and stepped away. The arts program endured through donors who preferred transparent routing. A magazine profiled Elena's approach to accountability with a headline about gentleness backed by steel. My name appeared twice, not as spectacle, but as context. I felt seen without being turned into a brand. On a Sunday I visited my foster aunt with cinnamon rolls and the locket warm against my skin. She hugged me at the door and cried in a way the house understood. We spread photographs across the table and scanned what time had started to eat. She apologized for everything she could not repair back then. I thanked her for rides, stitches, quiet and stubborn love. Elena arrived with flowers and listened the way only someone invested in every detail listens. Before leaving, we planned to digitize the paper trail that scattered my name across 3 counties. The foundation board requested a meeting. They wanted help. Elena brought data about interventions that work. Dana brought templates for oversight. I brought memory. We proposed changes: empower staff to halt proceedings when harm begins, mirror policies in public documents, require anti-retaliation clauses, and build a reporting channel that bypasses party planners. They accepted more than I expected because the weather had shifted, and the room finally noticed it. Spring coaxed color back into Seattle. I learned to throw clay bowls and loved the way the wheel told the truth about touch. I ran along the waterfront before breakfast and felt my lungs behave like teammates. Elena delivered a keynote about infrastructures that keep cities ordinary, and I sat in the front row feeling grateful for boring miracles. At home, we argued cheerfully about whether the scholarship in our mother's name should cover laptops or instruments. We decided both. The legal matter ended not with theater, but with signed acknowledgements that used plain language. The grants accepted responsibility for the ejection, issued a public apology that named me, funded training, restructured event protocols, and agreed to independent audits. Their reputation did not explode. It eroded in steady inches wherever people remembered that door, that rain, and the word used as a weapon. I did not need revenge to feel whole. I needed air, work, and a sister who kept the lights on. On the warm evening of summer, we rode the ferry to Bainbridge and leaned into a wind that smelled like cedar. We wrote the scholarship announcement on napkins, then typed it at a bookstore cafe. I signed my name without shrinking. Afterward, we watched the skyline recede and promised to protect each other's time the way pilots protect altitude. Messages arrive now from strangers who recognize pieces of themselves in my night. I read what I can and answer when energy allows. Some tell me they stood in rooms that called them accidental and walked out anyway. Some ask how to begin. I say begin by believing your name. I keep the locket near. I keep working steadily. I keep rest sacred. And when I speak to the community that carried me through, I ask the question that kept me upright on stone steps under hard light. What would you say to someone who wronged you? Let me know below. In those replies, I hear 1,000 doors opening, none of them requiring permission. From the moment a gilded door shut in her face, Maya's road seemed sealed, yet she refused to let one violent word become her label. She steadied her breath, tucked her fear behind her ribs, and kept moving through rain that mistook cruelty for weather. When engines hummed and cones of light carved the sky, a woman stepped through the storm and returned a name the night had tried to misfile. Elena did not offer rescue as spectacle. She offered kinship, memory, and proof that love can be as precise as a flight plan. Inside warm light, sisters pieced together photographs, recipes, and lullabies, turned grief into a map, and chose a door that opened because they pushed together. Back at the mansion, truth walked beside counsel, and a room trained to worship polish learned that decency has a voice sharper than chandeliers. Evelyn's script collapsed under the weight of witnesses, and David's silence finally sounded like the thing it always was, a decision. Maya did not beg. She spoke in the clear tone of someone who knows her worth is not a variable on anyone's ledger, and the house, its marble, portraits, and curated music, heard a story that would not shrink to fit a place card. She turned, coat on her shoulders, locket warm against skin, and descended the steps she had once climbed with borrowed courage, this time carrying her own. In the days that followed, accountability replaced gossip. Dana preserved messages, vendors honored the record, donors redirected gifts without humiliation, and the city discussed what generosity means when hierarchy eats empathy. Maya built a new rhythm at Carter Tech, translating risk into readiness, helping hospitals and schools keep ordinary days intact. Evenings belonged to sisterhood, conversations over soup, walks under ferry horns, playlists that braided the past to a future neither would navigate alone. She mailed back a ring with no note, because closure sometimes looks like stillness. Evelyn signed language that admitted harm. David learned that apologies arriving after witnesses gather are not repairs, they are echoes. Maya did not collect revenge. She collected breath, work, rest and community. She learned to throw bowls, to run until wind felt like friendship, to sleep without expecting doors to slam. She learned that power measured in uptime, payroll and unbroken nights serves better than postures measured in murmurs and invitations. She learned that belonging begins whenever one person stands beside you and refuses to let your name be treated like optional punctuation. Her story arcs from discarded to deliberate, from soaked marble to steady ground, from an audience conditioned to watch to a community ready to act. That arc is not fantasy, it is practice. It is calls made, records kept, hours logged, boundaries set, promises kept at cost, and the quiet joy of seeing light through clean glass after a storm spends itself. It is the day she sat at a desk with a badge that didn't wobble and solved a problem that would keep strangers safe. It is the night she told a room that legacy without empathy vandalizes the very cause it claims to serve. It is the morning she poured coffee for her foster aunt and said thank you with the steadiness she had earned. It is the ferry deck where she laughed so hard the bay carried the sound toward islands with names older than money. It is every moment since she has chosen doors on her own terms. Her journey says to anyone watching from sidewalks, buses, shelters, classrooms and offices that dignity can outlast thunder, that kin can be found after years of searching, and that repair is a craft worth learning together. Her journey says that a person is not a resume, not a list of contacts, not a rumor delivered between toasts, not a misreading in a database, and not a mistake in anyone's mouth. Her journey says that love without courage is decoration, and courage without love becomes theater. We need both braided. Her journey says that a single night can reveal what has been true all along, and that the work of healing then proceeds one clear day after another. Never judge someone's worth, you don't know their story. Hold that line, say it out loud, write it on the underside of programs and the top of meeting notes, tape it to mirrors, whisper it to friends who doubt their footing, and live it when rooms get cold. Let it guide the way you hire, mentor, welcome and give. Let it guide how you measure success, not by who stands nearest to chandeliers, but by who feels safe enough to speak and be heard without shrinking. Let it guide how you show up when harm starts. Step forward, say no, stand beside those targeted, and help move the night toward repair. Let it guide your version of family, whether bound by birth, adoption, foster memories, neighborly rituals, or chance reunions that arrive like jets through rain. Let it guide your version of leadership, which is simply care plus clarity, practiced until it becomes reflexive. Let it guide your version of wealth, which is not what glitters, but what holds. Systems that keep lights on, fridges humming, clinics open, teachers supported, staff respected, and ordinary people protected from avoidable storms. Maya's path is proof that the smallest steady acts, documenting, calling, listening, learning, resting, repeating, can redirect an entire night. Her path is proof that public harm can meet public correction without cruelty, and that consequences can seed better culture rather than feed spectacle. Her path is proof that when one person refuses to accept a wrong address in their life, everything rearranges to make room for truth. Her path invites you to check your own rooms, your own rituals, your own reflexes, and to build spaces where no one needs to earn basic respect at the door. Her path invites you to be the person who texts when weather meets cruelty, who opens gates, who says the precise thing at the moment it will shield a life. Her path invites you to keep searching for your people and to become that steady presence for someone still standing in the rain. And now it invites you to act with us. Smash that like button if Maya's story moved you. Comment what you do in her shoes, and subscribe for more stories of triumph. Hit the bell so you never miss an update. Bring your voice to a community that believes in repair, remembers names, respects boundaries, and holds leaders to clear standards. Share this with someone who needs proof that nights end. Tell us where you showed up for yourself and for others. Tell us how you built a door in a wall that pretended to be final. Tell us about the friend, mentor, neighbor, teacher, elder, or stranger who saw you whole. Tell us what policy you changed at work, what conversation you started at home, what apology you turned into practice. Tell us what you will do tomorrow that refuses humiliation and chooses care. Tell us if you want guides, templates, scripts, or resources. Our team will keep posting tools you can use in your school, clinic, shelter, union, startup, agency, or space.